All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this month's webinar. Thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to join this session. The subject of the webinar for this month is on tips and tricks on how to measure mats like a pro. Well, I'll be the first to tell you that I'm not a pro, but we've had a bit of experience over the years with measuring mats, a lot of different industries, a lot of different applications, and we want to share some of those learnings with you. So my name is Russell Herbert. I'm an account manager here at Acromat, and today's session is really I've been doing this about 10 years now, so I just want to bring some of those learnings to you, share some of the tips that we've found as we've gone along to help you become more efficient. So what we're looking at today is really a proven process that'll allow consistent results each and every time you need to go out and measure something custom. So we'll be actually demonstrating that. We have a bit of a mock work area behind me. So today's session, we're gonna actually demonstrate how to measure a mat for this area. And then we'll actually draw that up in AcroSketch and then show you what it's like to actually place this mat out once it's finished. There will be a handout emailed around afterwards that contains all these tips that we're talking about today. So feel free to take any notes if you want to. Otherwise, it will be shared around with you via email. And if you could put any questions you have in the chat, and we'll try and get to those at the end. And then lastly, Kimberly Seberg is also with me on the call, and she's going to put her email address in the chat as well. And after this session, we'll be distributing either a free measuring kit or a Yeti mug as a thank you for your attendance. So if you want to just email Kimberly directly with your choice of the free gift, we can get those dispatched as well. So without any further ado, we're going to jump right into this. So when you come to measuring mats, the first tip that we want to share with you, we tend to think in the mat world, we tend to think in rectangles. We think 3x5, we think 4x6, we think 3x8. Well, none of those things could, they could be the right thing. What we want to encourage is think in terms of what's right for the area, what's right for the application, what's going to be the safest solution. So our first tip is when you're evaluating an area for a mat, ask the operators. And in my experience, they can tell you without a doubt, how they want this mat designed. So it's really, really important to ask those operators, if there's one thing you could change about the mat you're standing on, what would it be? Let them know that we can create something to any shape or size you need, and they'll tell you. So in this instance here, let's say you have an operator working at this workbench, but they also need to be around the side here, offloading a piece of equipment. Well, that's not a problem. They may not realize that that can be done. So talk to the operator, and along with that, observe the travel path. So as you're watching the people working, you may notice certain things about their travel path that is, a frequent travel path. Observe those things because you want to be able to capture that in the mat you're going to create as well. The next tip to share with you, once you've got an idea of what we're trying to create here, make it as many times as possible, make it into a one-piece mat. That prevents any type of overlapping. It prevents any extra trip hazards. It's a lot easier to deploy once you get it. So there's not really a limit on how big we can go with these. So just keep that in mind and be thinking in terms of one piece wherever possible. Obviously, sometimes there's a need for it to be in sections, and we understand that and could work through those things if they need to be there. But as much as possible, think in one piece. So once you've got that kind of in your mind, the first thing you'll want to do, these are the measuring kits that we'll be dispatching afterwards. But the first thing you'll want to do in the measuring book that comes along with it, you have a graph paper in here. So the first thing is to sketch the area and sketch the shape that you're looking for. You don't have to be an artist to do this. You just need a rough shape. It doesn't have to be to scale. We're just trying to get the shape of the area, and then we'll add dimensions next. So as we look at this work cell behind me here, we're going to just go ahead and draw this shape. And it's just going to be a simple, we want to also cut underneath that table so that we allow if any operators are working close. So we're just going to draw that simple shape. And we want to also go all the way back to the wall on that side. And then we're just going to square it off out the front here. So you can see I'm not an artist, pretty rough shape, but it gives you the idea of how that's going to lay in over here against the wall. So once we have that shape, the next thing we like to do is mark where you want the bevels. So on any entrances to the work area, you're going to want a beveled edge. Any areas that are up against the wall or underneath equipment like this, we recommend keeping those square. You can add a bevel if you choose to those areas, but general rule of thumb, a square edge on the back is usually recommended. So in this case, we're just going to make an extra line here just on the inside of the edges just to show where I want to add those bevels. So pretty basic. That's if we're going to do yellow, that's a 3-inch bevel. If it's black, it's just a bevel cut into the mat itself. So now we have that. Another tip is always capture the area name. So when you put this in AcroSketch, I'll show you there's a field for that. So this might be machine ABC, it might be, cost center 7, whatever you use to identify that area, just add that as a label on here, and that helps when you're designing it. The mat will also come with a label on it so that it allows for easy placement as well. So we're just going to call this test mat 1, and you can just write that on there as well. So once you've got all that set, we're going to come over here and actually start taking some measurements for this particular mat. So the tip I want to share with you on this one is keep in mind tolerance of 1 inch. So there's a couple of reasons for that, and primarily it's because the mats are generally flexible and we don't need to get any tighter than a 1-inch tolerance. The other reason is, as you're measuring, you want to make sure you're not getting things too tight, because that can allow for the mat to get bunched up, and then that can create a trip hazard right there where it gets too tight. As much as possible, we want to eliminate having to trim the mat on site. That way you just slide it in, you don't have to fiddle with it afterwards. So give yourself some room as you're doing your measurements and keep it to a 1-inch tolerance. So as we start here, we're going to come all the way up to this wall. So if I look at this dimension, it's about 3 3/4 inches. I'm going to give myself a bit of room here. I don't want that too tight. So I'm going to call it 4 inches on here, just to allow room for that cutout to slide in. And then we're just going to go ahead and write that on the drawing here as we go around. So we've got 4 inches. The next tip, when you have people working up against a piece of equipment here, and their feet may be hanging over, if you did a straight line, they would be off the edge of the mat, and that can be very uncomfortable for the operator. So our rule of thumb when we're cutting in underneath there is to make that 8 inches. It allows plenty of room so that their feet don't tip off the edge. It also makes it easy for cleanup so that you've got enough mat there to sweep out from if you need to. So we're going to go ahead and call that 8 inches for the cutout. Then we're going to take the overall of this side here, the inside dimension. I have a total of 68 inches, and that would be really tight. So once again, allowing for a little room to slide in there, I'm going to go 67 inches so that it's not going to get bunched up on either one of these legs. So we're just going to go ahead and write that on there. Then the cutout is going to be 8 inches again. Then the leg itself, we have this as exactly 2 inches. Once again, allow some room. We're going to call this one 3 inches. Then we're going to measure back to the wall here. This one here is 28 inches. That's going to bring us up to the wall. And then in this example, we're going to go 2 feet out from the edge here and square this mat off as a 2-foot runner mat all the way around. So we can add those dimensions. And a couple of more tips here. As you're adding your dimensions, we recommend putting them in inches. That's the way it will be shown on AcroSketch. That way you don't have to convert your feet into inches and add some extra time to the equation. And then the other thing, as you're thinking about the depth of the mat, a couple things to keep in mind. One is back to the first tip on observing the area. Is there any cart traffic coming through here? Do they set pallets down? Are there things to keep in how wide your mat can be? Obviously asking the operators, get their take on it. And if you have a sort of an open floor plan and it's, you can do whatever you need to, we recommend thinking in 12-inch increments just to keep a consistent sort of standard. So in this one, we're going to do 24 inches for 2 feet. So once you've got those dimensions added on, you'll notice that the 2 outside dimensions I don't have listed on here. And that's okay because AcroSketch is going to find those dimensions for us. Certainly welcome to measure them out if you'd like to, but I'll show you when I put this in AcroSketch that those two dimensions are not actually required to make this mat. We know this is going to be a square edge here. So another tip I was going to share with you as you're working your way around, if you need to keep track of where you are, a good option, this one's called a trades marker, is just kind of like a chalk pen. So something like this, or even some tape, and you can actually tape out those corners where you want everything cut, because when you're measuring kind of out in no man's land, it gets a little bit hard to know where you're measuring from and to, and where you've already got to. So some sort of a chalk marker or some tape can help keep you straight as you're measuring. So now we have our design figured out. We're going to actually put this into AcroSketch, and I'll show you how to do that here if I share my screen here. So AcroSketch is on our website, acromat.com/AcroSketch. You click the configure button. And we'll click the custom option, and you're presented with this drawing screen. So we're going to go ahead and draw this shape right now. Once again, on the first pass, the shape is more important than the dimensions. We want to get it close, but we'll refine the dimensions after we've got the shape correct. So this particular shape is going to look like something along these lines. So now we have our shape. I want to zoom that in a little bit to get a little closer to what I'm looking for. So now we have plenty of room to play with. So our first dimension on the left side here is going to be 24 inches, so that's correct. The next one here needs to only be 4 inches, so you can just click on the line, drag that across until you get to the 4-inch mark. The cutout underneath, we wanted that to be 8 inches. Once again, you just click the line and drag it. We want 67 on the top. We already have that set at 8, so that's correct. And then we want this cutout to be 3 inches. So we'll pull that over till we hit the 3-inch mark. We want the distance back to the wall now to be 28 inches. then we want the width of this to be 24. So now you have this mat drawn exactly as we sketched it out. The next thing to do is we want to add these bevels. So you can scroll up on the tool and find the yellow border tool, which is right here. Go ahead and add those to the two sides that you want. And in this use case, we're going to select our 101 series mat in black. It already has the yellow border selected because we added that in the drawing. So it already knows that that's a chosen option. It's going to be textured. We're not going to have the drainage holes. We're not going to have the grip coat on this example. And then this is the area name. So the area name we grabbed from earlier, test mat number 1. We're going to plug that right in here. If there's any special instructions, you put those in here. You acknowledge the dimensions are correct. And there you have your mat designed exactly for test mat number 1. So that's completed. So from here, what we'll do next is once you submit that into an order, then that comes to our production team and we'll make it exactly to those dimensions and it will ship within 10 business days. So let's fast forward ourselves now to a couple of weeks out. You've placed your order, we've made it, we've shipped it, you've received it, and you're ready to deploy the mat. So a couple of tips here. Make sure you clean the area out, make sure there's nothing underneath, make sure the old mats are removed and gone. So you have an area like this that's all clean and ready for the new mat to be deployed. And so once you have it to that stage, we've got one here, and I'm going to show you how that works to just slide that in place. So you'll unbox it and you can go ahead and just slide that mat in. And you can see, because we allowed ourselves a little extra room, there's no bunching. It wasn't too tight. We didn't have to trim anything. And now you've got your mat all the way to this end. You have plenty of room for operators that might be standing up against the workbench. You've got a nice travel path around the corner. So as they're offloading their parts off of the machinery, they're not having to be on and off of a mat. There's no trip hazard. You know, they may be loading from a pallet down here onto the work cell. They may be, you know, offloading over here onto another pallet or another machine over here. And you can see the yellow safety edge is exactly how we designed it. There's one piece, no trip hazards, completely ready for use. And there's really no downtime because you're able to just put that right in place. So I guess we're about the 18-minute mark, and we've been able to share those tips. We've been able to draw this mat, measure it, design it in AcroSketch, get the quote, and now deploy it all that quickly. So what we want to do is start thinking, what's the right shape mat? What's the right design for the area? Instead of thinking in those rectangles, those standard off-the-shelf options. With AcroSketch, with our process, you can really make these sort of custom mats a standard procedure that's available for everybody. So if there's any questions, feel free to put those in. I think that covers all the tips that we had in mind for today's session. And like I said, we will be sharing these with you afterwards as well. The one question that does come up is, what about angles? What if we wanted to have an angle on one end of the mat? And that's a great question. It can certainly be done. And I'm going to just share my screen again and show you what we recommend when it comes to adding an angle onto a mat. So just give me a second and I'll reload my screen here. So when it comes to adding an angle, like I said, it's not a problem. We do a lot of those, so not an issue. When it comes to measuring the angle, that can be a little more challenging. So what we like to recommend is use that angle as the last dimension. So measure all the other dimensions first and let that angle calculate itself based on what all the other measurements are saying. So for example, if we're going to draw a mat that's say 36 inches wide, is 72 inches in length, and we just want an angle on this one corner here, we can create the shape like that. And then the other dimension we're going to know, let's say we know that this side needs to be 20. So right now it's showing 24. Once you click on that line, there will be a little pop-up in the corner here that shows everything about that line that's selected. And you'll see there's an A and a B point. So we want to lock point A so that it doesn't move. So you can just click the padlock, it will lock. And then you can change the length of that line down to 20 inches. And if we want to do the same on this line, you'll see the A and the B show up again. In this case, we want to lock point B and unlock point A so that we have the square around the other three sides. And this one, maybe we know that needs to be 55. And so by creating it that way, the tool itself figures out what the angle needs to be and how long that length is going to be. You can certainly double check that and make sure that it's close to how you want that designed. But that's just a little tip on doing angles, is let that be the last measurement, get everything else set how you want it, and it will calculate that angle for you. So that's a few tips that we wanted to share with you today. When it comes to measuring mats, it's not rocket science. It's good fun. You can do a lot with it. You can make a lot of happy people out there once you deliver something like this, that they don't have to kind of watch where they're stepping every time they travel from one piece of equipment to the other. The more measurements, the better. If in doubt, add another measurement. You can always double check it. So the more measurements, the better. I'm going to just check the questions here and see what we've got for those. Let's see. First question, tips on keeping mats in place in very dusty areas. That's a great question. We do have a couple of options for that, Levi, and I'll share some of those. We've obviously got the grip coat, which you've used. That can be a good option when there's a lot of dust that can actually find its way under the mat. It can wear down a little. So there's also some options to tape around the edges, which I can share with you as well, which is not a bad option too. So there's definitely some options for you, Levi. We'll get back to some of those offline. The next question says, if you only want yellow border on part of one edge, how do you do that? That's a great question. So let me share my screen once again, and I can show you how to do that. So if you only want the yellow to be on a part of an edge, I'm going to go ahead and delete this line here. So if you want yellow to be only a part way down this edge, what you can do is add a second point on that straight edge. So you can actually split that line into two different dimensions. Again, if you want to change, obviously I've got that just split in half right now. If you want to change where that point is, you click on it. Same thing here. We'll want to lock point A, unlock B, and maybe we want that to be 42 inches and then 30. And then you can apply the yellow bevel to just one of these two sides. So if you wanted it something like that. So certainly can be done just to add it in. You just have to add a second point to that line. Another question came in, will the online tool allow for curves? That's another good question. It doesn't allow for curved edges to be added. The reason being is that even if we make a curve, it's actually made out of a series of straight lines. So you can make your grid smaller. Right now it's set to 12-inch increments. If you shrink that down to, say, 2-inch increments, you can create a curve by creating a series of straight lines around the edge. So curves are possible through a series of straight lines, if that makes sense. So I think that covers what we had for the questions for today. And we'll follow up if we missed any. We'll certainly follow up with everybody as well. And as a reminder, everybody on the call today, we'd like to send you a gift as a thank you for attending. And you've got the option of one of our Yeti mugs or a free measuring kit, which includes the tape measure we just used and the notebook that we just used as well. So if you could email Kimberly with your choice, otherwise she'll definitely follow up with you on that. And where you'd like that to be sent, she can work on those. We will be sending around the handout afterwards. I'd like to thank everyone for their time. Looks like we finished a little early today, which is great. And hopefully everybody has a great rest of the day. Thank you for your attention. If you need anything else, please feel free to reach back out to us. We're always here for you. So have a good rest of the day. Goodbye.